Okay, be honest. Are you guys tired of chasing like quality items across a dozen different stores, trying to get the best value, the best item, the best quality? I'm going to tell you my life hack, and I'm actually going to show you some items because this holiday season, I'm going to help you make gifting super simple. Whether it's cozy clothing, thoughtful home goods, or just everyday essentials, Quince brings it all together. Premium quality, affordable pieces, and gifts that everybody will love. Now, I'm going to show you one thing. I've talked about this throw blanket before. I literally live with this throw blanket, but they have things from 100% grade A Mongolian cashmere and buttery soft bamboo bedding, which, by the way, we also have on our bed, all the way to 14 karat gold jewelry. They also have cast iron Dutch ovens, beautiful leather Italian bags. Quince literally brings all the high-end essentials together, all in one place. And actually, let me show you some of the stuff in my closet. I'm not lying when I tell you I own so many items from Quince. Here is a jacket that I love that is so cute. Actually, I love it so much that I got the long version in brown as well. Then speaking of like the cashmere stuff, I have not only cashmere sweaters from them that I am living in this fall, but also for travel, I have this cashmere set. So it's a shirt and the jogger. Their stuff is so good. This is so soft, I wish you could feel it. It's kind of like a shacket from them with this really thick, cozy material. Their stuff is just so good. And everything with Quince is priced 50% less than what you would find at similar brands. See, by working directly with top-tier manufacturers and cutting out the middleman, Quince gives you the exceptional quality, but without the markup. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes. So upgrade your wardrobe, your home, and more with high-end essentials from Quince. Go to the link in my description or go to quince.com/Annie Elise to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Again, go to quince.com/Annie Elise for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Hey, true crime besties. Welcome back to an all-new episode of Serialously. Hello, and welcome back to an all-new episode of Serialously with me, your host, Annie Elise, and I have a very special episode for you today. Now, if you have joined me on tour over the last few months, you know all about this case because this case first came across my radar back in the spring of 2025, and let me just tell you, when I first heard it, my radar, my red flag radar, it was going off like crazy. There were so many things that didn't make sense, so many things that didn't add up. And I knew that I needed to not only cover this case, but dive deeper in a way that I don't always have the opportunity or bandwidth to do. And so it takes place in Phoenix, Arizona. And right away when I heard about this, I was like, I need to talk about this case. This is going to be the case that I take with me on tour, on the road. I think so many people need to hear about this. Everybody needs to know about it. We need to create awareness. We need to share it. So I flew to Phoenix with my team. I met with the family and some friends, sat down with them, brought a film crew with us, and filmed a lot of these interviews and this information and everything I'm going to be breaking down with you today. And so today's episode is basically the polished version of the episode, or case, I should say, that we covered while we were on tour. I'm still going to be sharing with you those interviews, those videos, for those of you who are watching the YouTube version of this. And it's a different approach than how we normally cover these cases, but it is so important, and it is such a big case that it has stuck with me for so long, and I want as many people as possible to know about this case. So like I said, when I first heard about it, it just really hit me hard because it is everybody's worst nightmare. It's your partner, your loved one, your family member just being killed and gone in a split second. But before we dive into everything, I do want to say this is an ongoing case. Everything in this episode is alleged or from somebody else's point of view. Do your own research, form your own opinions. I just want to leave it at that and give you that blanket statement. But we are going to jump right in. and this is the case of Nick Cordova. 40-year-old Nick Cordova was a husband, a father, a business owner just trying to provide for his family. The night of May 27th, 2020, Nick had to work late. He was FaceTiming with his kids trying to make up for missing their bath time, and that is when two masked men walked into his workplace. Moments later, Nick was shot and killed. It's been 5 years, no arrests and no charges. But for the people who loved Nick the most, the nightmare never ended. So we flew out to Arizona and we sat down face to face with Nick's closest friends and family to try to get to the bottom of what really happened that night. So was this a random act of violence? Or was it something much closer to home? Because the deeper you look, the more tangled it becomes. Because the questions, they've only multiplied. As I mentioned, after I learned about Nick's story, I knew that I needed to go to Arizona and meet with the people who knew him best. His wife, Alicia, their two kids, Cruz and Capri, his mom, Teresa, his sister, Cherie, his best friend, Wendy. And I have to say, they are some of the strongest, kindest, and realist people, and most resilient people, I should just say, that I have ever met in my entire life. They welcomed me into their home, as well as some of my team, and they shared with us photo albums, family movies, so many stories, and were just so warm and welcoming. And they opened up in such a transparent and brave way as well, and you are going to hear from a lot of them today. But it's been 5 years now since Nick has been murdered, and let me tell you, there are a lot of red flags, a lot of twists, and a lot of shady things in this case. And honestly, after really digging into everything involved in this case, there are some people that I'm suspicious of, and there are moments, some moments that straight up just don't make sense, which, don't worry, I am going to unpack all of it for you. But first, I want you to meet the Cordova family, and while I could easily tell you who Nick Cordova was, the type of man he was, the type of father, the type of son, I think it's more important that you hear from his family. So I am going to let you hear directly from his wife, Alicia, his mom, Teresa, his sister, his best friend, and I really started by asking them the simplest yet most telling question, which was, who was Nick to you?
Nick was my protector. My dad was out of my life probably when I was 14, but he's always been there for me. Like, I could go to him with anything. Like, he was going to be the guy that walked me down the aisle if I ever got married. I just know that I could go with him for anything.
Nick was just always helpful to people. Like, I know if I had called him and I was like, I broke down, he'd be like, I'm on the way. So he's just a super helpful person to be around. But yeah, he would help anybody, and he's always fun. Always had a great smile. Just a great person to be around.
Watching him become the man that he had no father figure to look up to. So he became this father figure on his own. He knew how to take care of his children. He was so happy to become a dad and learn from not his past. So the way he became a dad, it was amazing.
When Chris was born, I saw him in the hospital, and he just had the biggest tears in his eyes of happiness. And he goes, Mom, I get it. I get it now. Understanding the mother-child relationship.
Nick was such a good dad. As like a father and a husband, it didn't get any better than him. He was hands down the most amazing man I've ever met. If you look up like characteristics of someone, like if you were to Google positive characteristics, he would mark every single one. And there isn't anyone that ever had anything bad to say about him.
We always had a good time together. He would drive us crazy by making us wait for him. He was always late to everything. He was always doing his hair or something. And then when he got older, we were still always waiting for him because he was always running late or helping somebody do something, or with it, he was notoriously late. So I kind of learned that.
Nick was such a big-hearted soul. He was so kind to everyone. He would go out of his way for anyone and everyone and do what he could. I've seen him help his friends out. He's always there. If anyone needs anything, he would drop everything and go help them no matter what, whether it be, physically or financially. He was the happiest kid, and great smile, always a go-getter, and big heart.
So on May 27th, 2020, it started out like any regular day, which, don't get me wrong, I know that is a cliche and people always say that, but it really was a regular day. Nick went off to work, Alicia was with the kids, but by evening, everything had changed because Nick had to stay late at work and he was going to miss bath time and bedtime with his kids. Now, we all know in this age of technology, we can easily FaceTime with our loved ones to say goodnight or to be there if we can't be there physically in the present. So like many of us parents do, Nick was FaceTiming with his kids to say goodnight. In fact, Capri, his daughter, wanted to FaceTime with him to show him a new trick that she had learned on TikTok that day. Because remember, this was also 2020, which was like peak TikTok era. And so they were FaceTiming and talking to one another, talking about TikTok tricks, their day, nothing major, not knowing that this was going to be the last time that she ever spoke with her father. Because what happened next, it was sudden, it was brutal, and it was completely unimaginable.
The day of Nick's murder was a Wednesday, and we had just gotten back from a camping trip for Memorial Weekend for a friend's birthday. He got a super late start that day. Remember him saying he was going to go, the kids are grabbing onto his leg, like, don't leave, Dad, don't leave. And so he walked out the door, and I always packed his lunch for work and make him like a green smoothie. And it's kind of funny because he would take Cruz's old Paw Patrol lunchbox. And so he's just a handsome, beefy man, and he's got a Paw Patrol lunchbox in his hand and this green juice. But he walked out the door, and I followed him out and was like, no kiss or something, and I smacked his butt, and he gave me a kiss, and I said, be home at a decent time. And then he left. That was all. I didn't hear from him throughout the day. He normally was so busy, we'd send a text here or there, or I would send a picture of the kids or something, missing you or this or that, but otherwise we didn't really talk a whole lot during the day. And that day I don't remember talking to him until the kids called him to show him a TikTok trick around 5:25-ish. Capri had a little iPad Touch, and you could call people on FaceTime on there. So she called her dad, and they were just sitting in the hallway. There was some outlet trick. You can plug the charger into the wall like 5 times and then take it out and plug it into the phone, and then it'll still charge. I don't even know if it worked or not. I was in the kitchen doing dishes or something, not watching. I remember him saying, what's mom doing? And then I'm like, right here doing dishes. And she started counting down like 10, 9, or 1, 2, 3, whatever she was counting. And then that's when everything started taking a turn. I just remember Capri saying, Mom, something's happening, something's wrong with Dad. And so I came and grabbed her little iPad Touch, and I look at it, and I could just see like muffled. It looked like, things were being moved around. That's why I thought maybe he had put his phone in the pocket. And then I heard what I thought was like yelling. And then I just panicked because I just felt in my gut that something was wrong, and I couldn't figure out where my phone was. So I'm like running around trying to figure out what my phone was, and then I found my phone in the room, and so I called 911.
Your emergency. Yes, I'm on FaceTime with my husband. My kids are FaceTiming, and someone came in and started beating him. I think they have
what's your address?
Gilbert Air, and Gilbert Air. I can't even look at the address right now. I'm freaking out.
Is he at work?
Yes, he's at work. His address is 511 West Guadalupe Road, number 13.
2 men come into the lobby, and they have a box of what looked like Freon, and there's some words exchanged between them by the door, and you just see them walk into the office, and then there were no cameras in the office, which is also very odd to me, why there would be no cameras in there. But you see them walk into the office, and then within 3 seconds, I think Nick said, what's that or something, because I think they might have said like, oh, you want to buy Freon, or that's what I gathered from what Dave had said. But I think Nick says, what's that? And then you can hear like that something's going on in there. And then you see Nick try to run out.
As they started piecing things together, one key question kept coming up. Who did this and why? Was this some random act of violence, or was Nick actually targeted here? Because here's the thing, nothing was stolen from Gilbert Air. Not a single thing. And the other co-owner of Gilbert Air, Dave, who was there when all of this happened, he walked away basically unharmed, aside from a cut on his head, which, don't worry, we will get into that in just a minute here. But the deeper that you dig into this case, the more questions that it raises. And trust me, there are a lot of questions.
I saw these two men walk into Gilbert Air, and the shorter, stockier man that was seen going into AM/PM, he has a very distinct walk. I've watched the AM/PM tape thousands of times, like just trying to analyze anything. Like he has on steel-toe boots. Like he looks like he might be working construction because they had construction outfits on. But just by the way, they were fully clothed from head to toe when they came into Gilbert Air. But just by the way his body was when he came into AM/PM, I just know it was him, and the timeline of them, and they have pings of things where they know that those two men that were there with that truck are the same two men that went down the street to the AM/PM. So they were fully covered. You couldn't see anything. Hats on, like whatever they're like construction sailor type hats, mask, long shirts, pants, boots. I think they had gloves on. But for me, my thing was like, if that were someone I knew, I would maybe be able to identify who they were, even if they were fully covered, just by their body type or their mannerisms or their walk or something. So I don't think it was a robbery. Nothing was taken. I don't think that two men would come into an air conditioning company and not take anything. In his air conditioning company, it wasn't a place where you would buy things. It was like a warehouse and like a shop and an office. It wasn't, no one would come in there to rob the place. The detective that was on the case at the time had told us that there was a potato with a hole in it that was found. And so I start looking into it, and I feel like people know that a potato is used as like a natural silencer. So I had questions with that as to maybe it was premeditated, rather than two men just coming in and quickly trying to rob the place, that it was something that had been planned. I think someone came in to have him killed, and I don't know exactly why. There are some reasons to believe certain things, but I can't really go into detail on a lot of that. But I do 100% believe that someone targeted him and had him killed.
Okay, so I know that was a lot to take in, but before we dive deeper into the idea that Nick may have actually been targeted, and even more than that, who could have possibly been behind it, there are a couple of things we need to go over. First up, I want to talk about the potato of it all, because when I first heard about this, I had heard rumblings here and there that a potato could be used as a natural silencer, but I never knew enough about it to really, definitively say one way or another if that's true. But when we put this together, and if you're watching again the video version of this, you'll see we actually did a reenactment where we used a gun on a potato, and there's a lot of conflicting information regarding this potato. First and foremost, the original report described it as having a chunk gouged out of one side of it. But then in a later version, any mention of this potato was completely redacted, poof, gone completely. So we decided to put the theory to the test. Could a potato actually work as a silencer? We got a potato, we got the gun, we did the legwork, and technically, yes, it could be used as a silencer, but every single time we fired the gun and tried it, the potato exploded into a million pieces. Never was there a clean hole, never was there just a single chunk removed, it just exploded. No single shot did it ever stay intact. So that then really makes you wonder, if investigators actually did find this whole potato with a hole cleanly carved out of it at the scene of the crime, how did it get there? If it wasn't used as a silencer, why was it there? This was an industrial type of business. There wouldn't have just been a potato lying around. So could it have been planted? Maybe not even used, but staged? Did somebody want this to look like it had been used as a silencer to start making this look like it was a targeted murder? And second, for all of you watching on YouTube, I want to play a quick animation for you. You'll still hear the movements of everything if you're listening to the audio version of this, but there is an actual animation I'm going to put on screen. If you're familiar with the Karen Reed case, then you probably are familiar with the name Microdots. He's an incredible creator. He created a lot of animations regarding that case. They actually ended up using, I believe, a couple of them in closing arguments. So I had reached out to him when we were first looking into this case, and I asked him to create an animation for us that showed what Nick may have been walking into that day. And I want to play it for you here. And again, if you are listening to the audio only version, you can go check this out on YouTube afterward, but I do walk you through the movements. So as Nick was on FaceTime with his kids, two masked men entered through the front office door. They turned left into the office where both Nick and the co-owner of Gilbert Air, Dave, were at. Nick was sitting right here at the first desk on the left. And it's unclear exactly where Dave was at that moment, but we do know that he was in the room. And from what we've gathered, one of the men immediately started shooting at Nick, while the other went straight to Dave and pistol whipped him. Now, this next detail comes from our research, but it hasn't officially been confirmed. But it seems that Nick was shot at about 5 times, and he may have dodged the first 3 bullets. However, the final 2 did hit him, and it was one or both of those shots that were fatal. And again, all of this happened while Alicia was still on FaceTime. Okay, so I know that we said we would come back to Nick's business partner, so I want to get into that, okay? You know I love a red flag. And what you're about to see, it definitely gave me pause because get this, the day after Nick was murdered, Alicia started getting all kinds of text messages from Dave, the other co-owner. And I'm only going to show you a very small piece of it, but here's the backstory here. Alicia was trying to allegedly stop Dave from firing key members of the team. Now, his reasoning for firing them was that they weren't communicating with him. But the truth really was they were scared. This was all right after the murder. Nobody knew who was behind it. They didn't know if anybody was coming back, if maybe they thought there was an eyewitness. People were grieving the loss of their boss. They were terrified. They were, just scared for their lives. But Dave, he apparently was just ready to keep things moving, business as usual.
I don't understand how this is happening with my company. People acting as if I'm not the boss. I'm a businessman, and I'm going to make sure we stay busy no matter what. I'm personally offended by this treatment.
Dave, they do not want to meet with you. You're a victim, and they're afraid someone will come after them too. This is not about you, and it's not your company. It's ours. We're both their bosses now, and I'm not signing off on them being fired. 75% of the clients are Nick's. If I have to get my lawyer involved, I will. Things can wait for a week. You asked what you can do for me. You can give me a week to grieve the loss of my husband.
Okay, Alyssa, then that's what you'll have to do.
I'm making a payment on the Amex and paying a bill. I have Nick's business chase card. Please refrain from making any large withdrawals from the account in the meantime. We need the money in the account for the business, not your personal debt. And it's Alicia.
I'm stepping up. Gilbert Air was a big company before Nick, and it will remain that. If you're telling me you're taking Gilbert Air's customer, which it sounds like you are, you're going to buy yourself a civil lawsuit. You're not a company officer. So taking from the company account is stealing. I'm checking the account in the morning at the bank. If there was $1 missing, I'll be filing a police report. I'm not going to be pushed around by you or anyone.
You told me earlier I could make a payment. These are bills for Gilbert Air. This company before Nick stepped up was shit, and you know it. I will contact my lawyer tomorrow. Please don't message me again.
No, I didn't. I told you to wait until we meet, and we will pay it as more money comes in. But it seems like you're trying to take my company and my customers out from under me. Sounds good. If there's $1 missing, I'm filing a police report for fraud.
Well, I'll wait to make the payments then. We will meet next week after I bury my f***ing husband. This is my company too. You didn't do shit for it. My husband did everything. Don't text me again. Don't text me again.
If you calm down and come to your senses, feel free to reach out to me. I want to move forward as a team, but it seems like I'm going to be suing a lot of people. Sweetheart, I've put in 10 times what you guys have, and right now it's my company. I'm trying to be respectful and nice. You're not in your right mind, and you're definitely going about this the wrong way.
Now, I will just say, it never bodes well when you call a girl sweetheart in a condescending or passive-aggressive way. Just a little pro tip for any of my male audience who is listening. And I mean, look, it's interesting, right? But does it mean anything concrete? Maybe not. And the truth was, the investigation was all over the place. They went through 4 different lead detectives. 4. And every single time a new one came in, it was like hitting a reset button, starting from scratch, trying to get them up to speed, having them learn all the nuances of the case. It was awful. There were delays, there were detours, and honestly, there were some decisions that just made 0 sense. And the deeper that Nick's family tried to dig, the more they just kept hitting dead ends. Things didn't add up, pieces were missing, and no matter how hard they pushed, it felt like they were getting nowhere. Which you can only imagine how frustrating that is, right? Fighting so hard for answers and essentially getting silence in return.
My experience with the law enforcement after this happened has been horrible. We were the only ones that kept having to go to them.
It was hard because they weren't giving us anything. They weren't telling us much. We got the camera shot of the suspect going into the AM/PM ARCO a few weeks afterwards. They weren't really letting my mom or Alicia know much. So it was just hard.
There have been 4 detectives that have been on Nick's case. We started with a gentleman who he was just kind of briefly on the case, and then it went to another guy who he was the most informative, and I think he might have possibly shared a little too much than he should have with us in the early days, but there was also a lot of promises made, and I feel like he was like emotionally connected to Nick's case because he was there when we found out that Nick had been murdered, and so he had a tie from the beginning, and I thought that was great that he cared so much about it. And then one day we just hear that he is no longer on the case and he was moving down to patrol, which to me, why would a detective move down to patrol?
It was just like pulling teeth trying to get information. Not one time did we ever hear from the chief.
We want to be clear that the Gilbert Police Department is committed to solving this case and bringing the individuals involved to justice.
We want to know what took place on that day in May 27, 2020, as much as everybody else does.
Okay, so let's get back to Dave here for a minute, Nick's business partner. Obviously, my team and I had to do some digging of our own on him. And I'll be honest, between what we found and what Alicia, her family, and their close friends shared with us, there is a lot of speculation surrounding this guy. All alleged, all speculation. But as I mentioned earlier, Nick co-owned Gilbert Air with Dave. And while Nick wasn't really the type to vent much about business, the people around him could tell that he was stressed, really stressed, especially in the months leading up to his death. And in the days leading up to his death, he finally started opening up specifically about the business, about what was really going on behind closed doors. And he was confiding in them about some things that he was really worried about. Being followed, money going missing, some really scary things. And there's one thing in particular that he said to people close to him, which it's something that now in hindsight, it feels downright chilling.
I have never met Nick's business partner, Dave, before. I've never been around him, or I've never been in Gilbert Air and him be there, or I didn't know who he was.
Nick's relationship with Dave was purely business. They didn't hang out outside of the office. I don't ever remember seeing him except for one time when the kids and I went in there to check on Gilbert, which was the fish that Nick had bought for the shop. And then as we neared the end of 2019 into, I want to say 2020, he started saying things about like he'd come home, and he never really brought work home. He tried to keep that separate. He'd come home and just like immediately hands-on with the kids and bath time and eating and bedtime and whatever. But we'd lay down or at the end of the night and I just know something was wrong. I'm like, babe, what's up? And he's like, I gotta figure this out. Like, I want to get out of this partnership. I want to get out of this business. I don't know if this was the wrong move. He just wasn't happy with where they were sitting, but he never went into a ton of details about anything that would, like, specific that was going on.
So in the months ahead, I could see the stress in Nick he was experiencing. He did say he did notice money that was missing in the business account that were withdrawn. And Nick was fearful of who was withdrawing that money. And at that point, I just felt like there was a lot of tension between him and his business partner, and things were happening that I was worried about, which I did not know what, but I felt it.
So I was in the kitchen doing dishes and he came in and said, like, somebody's following me, or I feel like something's off, somebody is not after me, but that somebody was possibly following him or watching him. And I just kind of brushed it off, like, babe, there's no one's following you, like, you're being crazy. And then I just felt like his mood had kind of just been off that night. And so later on, he had said something to the extent of, if anything ever happens to me, I just want you to know that Dave is behind it.
And then we went to Arizona and he drove my vehicle. So me and Nick were sitting in the front seats together and just talking about business. Said something about a key man policy and I was like, I don't even know what that is. And so he was explaining to me, like, well, if something happens to, one of your business partners, then that money would go towards the business to help it stay running and stuff, while, figuring out the loss of a person and stuff. And I was like, it's for $5 million, like, that's a lot of money. He's like, yeah, so if I ever go missing or something ever happens to me, you know who did it. So I was like, at the time, like, okay, like, that's not funny. Like, are you being funny or, like, not funny? Like, I don't know how to take it, so.
Now, we always say, follow the money, right? It usually will lead to the truth one way or another. But in this case, the financial trail, it opens up a whole new layer of questions. I mean, was it just messy and bad bookkeeping or miscommunication? Was there something way more calculated going on, maybe something intentional and sinister? Because once you start following the numbers, things get very, very interesting.
So I knew prior to that Nick had some sort of key man life insurance policy, but I didn't know details about it. He never said, I don't remember him ever telling me how much it was or anything. But in my defense, he'd be talking to me while I'm here dealing with these kids or I'm in the kitchen. So I feel awful saying this, but a lot of things he would talk about with work, I was just like, and then not really paying attention. So I do remember him saying that he had a key man life insurance policy for the business. And I didn't know a lot about that till after Nick passed. I started doing some research and I'm going through his laptop and looking up emails and going through our files and trying to find anything that I can about life insurance, and then come to find out that there were two different policies, both that were for the company, and there was one that we were in the process, we didn't have a personal life insurance policy, we were in the process of trying to get one, but then COVID happened and all of that, so we didn't have personal life insurance policy or a will or anything like that set in place for us, but he did have policies for the business that I found out afterwards, and I can't disclose like amounts of what they were.
What led you to believe something was wrong with the paperwork initially, and then what caused the argument and the fight between you and Dave?
So Dave thought that he should be entitled to a huge chunk of the life insurance policy and I should only be getting a smaller portion. And I did not agree with that. My husband never would have agreed to sign off on something that left a business partner who he did not care for or have a relationship with money and then leave his wife and children, who were his entire world, close to nothing. And so I said, like, I'm not going to agree to this. And It took me a while for one of the policies. They were requesting HIPAA documents. And I told Dave, like, I'm not signing off on any of this. I need some time. I literally said, like, let me bury my husband before we're even dealing with any of this life insurance stuff. So I just put that aside for a bit until I could figure out hiring a lawyer and what I was gonna do. I hired a lawyer and submitted these HIPAA documents, and they told me that they had already been submitted. And I didn't submit them, and I'm not sure who did, but I don't know who else would have benefited from submitting them besides him. There was alleged forgery, and I filed a police report with Gilbert PD, and I gave them all the documentation, and there was an investigation that went into it through their specialists for the life insurance company. And so that was a huge thing where they had to do some digging in. And with Gilbert PD, I talked to the lady who was the one that like took my statement and gave me the police report number and all of that. But whenever it came down to it, she said that it was a letter that got sent in. The paperwork was through letter form, and it was mailed in, and they couldn't trace it back to who it was. So that ended up leading to nothing. So we never found out who was behind submitting the documents on my behalf.
For 4 years, Alicia and Dave's lawyers went back and forth over these life insurance policies. And eventually, Alicia was just drained, mentally, emotionally, financially, and her lawyer told her, your best option is just to settle. You'll avoid this long, drawn-out trial, endless legal fees, all the stress that is going to come with it. So she took his advice, and she settled. But between the nonstop text messages, the ugly insurance fight, and Dave constantly changing his story, the suspicion around him, well, it only grew stronger.
At that time, I did what I felt was best for me and my family, and I wish I could have dragged it out till trial and just saw it to the end, and who knows what would have come of that, but I just did what I felt like I needed to do to just settle and be done with the life insurance policies.
Once you learned about the life insurance policy and Dave going after that money and there being this alleged forgery, which nobody knows who was responsible for that, but that then coupled with the fact that Dave was there on the day of Nick's murder, that he was left unharmed, did anything start to enter your mind as to questioning, could things be going a little bit deeper here?
Yes, I definitely, my mind was already leaning towards him having some sort of involvement prior to the life insurance policies, like knowing that he was going to fight me for them. I already was leaning towards something with that, but I couldn't say whether he was or not, and to not get charged with slander or defamation, I'm not going to say that I think that he's behind Nick's murder, but anyone that looks at his case you can take one look and see where the signs are pointing to.
It's obvious, and they know it, but...
Now sure, the signs might be pointing at Dave, but does that definitely mean that he planned and carried out a calculated murder? Not necessarily. But you know us, we dig, we sleuth, and let's just say, as for Dave, he's not exactly a waving clean slate. According to public records, he has been tied to some prior legal drama, including allegations from a past relationship. And that is actually how we came across his mugshot. Now, Dave's ex-wife, Laura, actually died during the course of their divorce and under circumstances that remain suspicious and largely unclear. Now, the official investigation report into Laura's death is heavily redacted, but based on what we can piece together, Laura was found in a bathtub, and it appeared to be a drowning. But here's where it gets weird. There was a pill bottle at the scene, a prescription that had been written in somebody else's name, and the pills were missing. So you would think, okay, that infers that she must have had some sort of substance abuse problem that perhaps, or maybe this was self-harm. She took all these pills that were in somebody else's name, but a prescription no less, gets in the bathtub, drowns, and dies. But here's the thing, when the tox report came back, it was completely clean. No drugs in her system. So naturally, that raises way more questions than it answers, right? And family and friends believed that Dave was behind Laura's death. But without any solid proof, nothing ever came of it. And get this, shortly after her passing, Dave collected a $3 million life insurance payout. Now, something else that we also do know for sure is that before Laura's death, while this divorce was still ongoing, Laura had filed a petition for an order of protection against Dave. And it stemmed from a domestic incident that had occurred back on April 21st, 2013. And I want to read this to you because in her own words, Laura wrote, "I told him I wanted a divorce. The children were not at home. He dragged me into the house. I tried to escape 3 times, but he was strangling me around the neck and blocking the door, dragging me back inside when I would make it out. We argued for 1 hour and 22 minutes. I finally escaped and I called the police. I'm afraid it will happen again. He's going to be even more mad that he was arrested." Now, another important thing to mention is that in the weeks leading up to her death, Laura had confided in a friend of hers named Stacy. She said that Dave had been cheating on her and that he actually fathered another child with this mistress. So Laura told Stacy that she didn't want to be with somebody who could cheat and lie, but even more than that, she was afraid of Dave. And Stacy later told the investigators, quote, "She seemed afraid of him. She really did." Laura also said that if she tried to take the kids, Dave told her she would regret it. So this obviously doesn't look good, right? He has this past with his wife who died under what seems to be possibly, unclear circumstances. He gets this large payout. Nick dies, he gets a large payout, and he fights for that payout. And even in Nick's case, some of Dave's own statements don't quite add up. For example, allegedly, on the day of Nick's murder, Dave told the police that he handed the robbers his wallet and all of the cash that he had inside his pockets. But then, apparently when the officers searched him, they found over $1,000 still in his left pocket, which I guess he later changed the story, claiming he had only given them cash from his right pocket, which, I don't know, you tell me. I luckily, knock on wood, have never been held at gunpoint, but I would imagine that if I was being held at gunpoint and I just watched somebody fire off several bullets into my business partner, I'm emptying both pockets, but what do I know? But it's details like these combined with Dave's past that have fueled speculation around him for years, not just from Laura's friends and family or Nick's loved ones, but also from countless people online in the true crime community, people who have followed this case very closely. And there are a lot of theories out there, and not to go off on any conspiracy theory rants, but there are a couple theories that kept surfacing to the top that I felt like it's worth mentioning them, just so that you have all of the information and you can come to your own conclusions with this. So I'm going to read a couple of them for you. This first one says, "What's your theory here? That David sent these men to kill Nicholas in order to get the money? That would be my theory, absolutely. I think the life insurance being changed so soon before the murder and it not being done by Nicholas speaks volumes. I also think him pressuring Alicia to file so soon after Nicholas's death says a lot as well, on top of the fact that he just got a little bump to the head when Nicholas was outright killed. If these men weren't connected to Dave, why didn't they kill both Dave and Nicholas?" Which I think that's the million-dollar question that everybody has, right? This next one says, "Obviously the business partner is shady, but it strikes me as odd that he would hire people to kill his business partner and then stay on the premises. It's apparently completely normal for this guy to not even be in the office. So what, they have a loud closed-door meeting that same day? If this guy did it, he's dumb." And what they're referring to is apparently Nick and Dave weren't always in the office, but they both happened to be in the office this day. And according to employees, allegedly they did get into an argument behind closed doors. This next one says, "The business partner's former wife drowned in her bathtub and what, he got her life insurance too? Drowning in the bathtub sounds as realistic as, quote, the bad guys knocked me out right before they killed the victim," end quote. And this next one I was unsure if I was going to mention. You'll see why in a second, but it is, I should say, a big theory out there. So I feel like, again, I need to just mention it all. So it says, "The whole thing about the silent and probably not so random murder is that it was a front for money laundering. Gilbert is a 2-hour drive off the freeway from the Mexican border, so it's not far-fetched that someone came over just long enough to commit the murder and then went back to Mexico before the police could catch up." And when you really start digging into this more and more, it starts to make insinuations about the cartel being involved, maybe drug exchanges, money laundering, all sorts of things. So again, don't want to get too conspiracy, but it is one of the bigger theories out there that has been bubbling to the surface multiple times, so wanted to throw it out there. Now, of course, my team and I, we wanted to do our due diligence, right? So we tried to get an interview with Dave ourselves. We tracked down his cell phone, we verified that it was his, and we reached out to him. And he ended up declining to speak with us on camera, but we did exchange some messages with him, and what he said was a lot. He did admit to being there the day that Nick was killed. According to him, he was assaulted, he was hit in the head, and he says that what happened that night was so terrifying, and he's still scared that it could happen again. Saying, "I was there when this happened to him. I was assaulted and hit in the head. It was very scary and scarring. I will never forget it." He also said that he believes that this was not personal, that it was business, or more specifically, something darker. Saying, "I fully believe that this was a drug deal gone bad because of things Alicia has said since, and the fact that Nick was their only concern that day." Then he also made a series of claims that shifted the spotlight off of him and directly onto Nick and his wife Alicia, saying, "I filed a police report against Nick and Alicia after his death for embezzlement, and it was to the tune of over $400,000. Alicia told people he was carrying $50,000 in cash the day that he was killed, but the police only found a couple thousand. We found out that he was taking cash payments, going into the system under the office manager's name, and then zeroing out the invoices. He also insisted that if we really wanted answers, we should stop looking at him and start looking at Nick. And then he said, "If you ever decide to dig into Nick rather than me, please let me know. There is a lot more to uncover." Now, whether you believe Dave is being honest or not, or just trying to shift blame onto somebody who is no longer here to defend himself, that's for you to decide, and totally fair. Like I said at the top of this episode, I want you all to form your own opinions and come to your own conclusions. But one thing's for sure, this case is messy, it's emotional, and it is full of contradictions, and still none of that explains why Nick Cordova was shot and killed inside his own business. So with all of that out on the table, I wanted to ask some of my friends in this space what their thoughts are on it. Some of my professional friends who have been prosecutors, who have worked on cases, who have commented on cases, and just kind of get their take on this. And during the tour, at this point, I actually had audience participation. We had a QR code on screen where you guys could share with me who you thought was responsible before I brought in the expert opinions. So really quickly, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening, I guess, on Spotify, since that's the only place where you can leave a comment, let me know what you think. Do you think that Dave was responsible for Nick's murder somehow? Do you think that whether he hired them or whatever he did, do you think that it was just the two men who were seen on the CCTV footage and it was completely random? Or do you think it's something else entirely, that maybe there was some sort of shady involvement or something like that? What do you guys think? So sound off in the comments, and now I want to share with you some of my friends' opinions on this. So let's start with Brian Enton, and I'm sure many of you guys know Brian Enton from News Nation, from his own new hit podcast, and he is amazing. He covers so many cases all the time. So let's hear what Brian had to say.
Hey Annie, it's Brian Enton. So when the public has a strong theory about who did it in a case, but the DA is staying silent, I know it drives all of us crazy. It drives us reporters crazy. It drives true crime followers crazy because we want more information and we want to know exactly what the district attorney knows. But I have to say, at the end of the day, I think for the cases, many times it's actually a good thing. Many times the prosecution and the police really do have to stay totally silent during an investigation because they don't want to compromise the investigation. If they told the public everything they knew, it could end up being a real issue when they finally go to trial. One example of this is with the Brian Kohberger case. I was very critical of the police early on during the investigation before Brian Kohberger was arrested. We thought police basically knew nothing and that they weren't doing much behind the scenes and that they weren't doing enough. Well, it turns out they were actually doing a lot. They had already narrowed it down to Brian Kohberger. They were investigating him. We just didn't know about it. So at the end of the day, while we want to know info, I think sometimes it really does make sense for the DA to stay quiet.
Next, I wanted to ask Matt Murphy, and you may know Matt Murphy from, he is an ABC commentator. He has been on so many different programs, 2020s, all of the things. He also prosecuted in the Dirty John case, and he is like a huge person in the true crime space. So I wanted to ask him what he thought.
Hey guys, Matt Murphy here, former homicide prosecutor. I got some really interesting questions about the Nick Cordova case out of Gilbert, Arizona. Why do prosecutors hold back information in murder cases? Prosecutors have an ethical obligation essentially to maintain the integrity of their case. And part of the job of a prosecutor, a lot of people don't know, is to ensure the constitutional rights of any criminal defendant that winds up on their desk. In short, you don't want to do anything that's going to screw up the investigation or, more importantly, the ultimate prosecution of someone. Why do some investigations take so long? And what happens when it appears like the detectives are not acting fast enough? You never want a detective to sacrifice the integrity of the case for speed. There's no statute of limitations on murder. So when you have an active open investigation and you've got clear suspects, which I think this case does, you always want to make sure that you cross every T, dot every I, and take every procedural step as carefully as possible, because you never want to rush it and wind up in arresting somebody prematurely, because once somebody's acquitted, it's over. It's over for the case and it's over for the victim's family. Why are some pieces of evidence released publicly and others are not? It really does depend on the cases, but sometimes you've got, a photograph or a video can be of tremendous help if it's released to the public. Other times you can do more harm than good when you release something publicly because, well, for two main reasons in my experience. Number one, sometimes you never want to taint witness's testimony. In other words, if ID is important, you never want somebody to come in and say, you never want the defense lawyer to be able to say, you're not identifying them based on what you saw, you're actually identifying them by what was released publicly. So you got to avoid that. But also behind the scenes, every time something goes public, your police department, and Gilbert is not a large police department, the phones are going to flood with tips. And 99% of the times, those tips have nothing to do with your case. So you're essentially tasking a lot of resources, and you're going to spend that sometimes chasing ghosts. I think that this is a really, really interesting case, and I think that they've got a suspect. There's a lot of weird stuff that happened surrounding this business deal. And again, everybody is presumed innocent. Nick's former business partner is presumed innocent, but there's a lot of things uncertain about him, and especially the insurance in this case and his behavior right after, that probably caught the attention of these detectives.
Now, bringing in one of my friends who covered the Karen Reed case extensively, I wanted to ask my friend Peter what he thought about this case and why there may be some delay and all of this speculation, but nothing coming to fruition and no arrests being made. And listen to what Peter had to share.
What's up, Annie? It's Peter Tragos, the lawyer you know down in Florida. And I know so many people have questions about this Nick Cordova case. And I know it can feel really difficult when the public feels like they know who did it and why they did it, but the prosecutor or law enforcement is not making a lot of comments and playing things close to the vest. And year after year after year that goes by with no answers, it gets more frustrating. And there can be a reason for not revealing too much information in investigations like this, where you don't want to tip off somebody to let them know that you may be close, or you may have something tapped or bugged, or some informant that is working on something bigger that the public may not know about. And it can be so difficult to prosecute a case that's 5, 6, 7 years old because witnesses' memories fade. They may disappear. They may die in that time period. Evidence may disappear. It may be destroyed. It may be lost. Chain of custody issues can become a real problem, and we've seen it with other cases. But what we've also seen is that even though 3, 4, 5 years go by, it doesn't mean it's over. And there can be a lot of pressure on both sides, right? As the public can become interested in a case like this, as there is media attention and coverage and people talking about this injustice, and very strange, right? It seems like there's so much information, a video of the potential killer, motive that seems kind of obvious when you look at the timeline, opportunity, being potentially at the crime scene when the crime occurred. Yet you get crickets, no arrests, no defendants, no trials, no convictions. So why? Well, it's the thing we all saw in the Karen Reed trial and some of the other trials across the country, reasonable doubt. If you don't have enough as a prosecutor to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt and convict the defendant you charge, you shouldn't bring those charges. You shouldn't move forward on a case you don't believe as a prosecutor that you can prove. Because you are supposed to be seeking truth and justice. And you know how the rules work. You know how the law works in America. You have to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt in criminal court. And if you as a prosecutor don't think you can do that, you shouldn't bring the charges. So the only two real options I can see in this case as why charges haven't been filed is either there's something bigger and they're still working and they're still building the case, or there's just not enough there for prosecutors that they feel like they can prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt for any one or multiple defendants that may be involved in this tragedy. So that's why these cold cases can be so difficult for the public to understand, for the victims to deal with, and for prosecutors dealing with all the pressure from the outside to do the right thing.
Now, lastly, I had to round this out by having one of the biggest commentators out there in the space, Vinny, join me from Court TV. So let's hear what Vinny had to say.
Hey everyone, it's Vinny Politan from Court TV. So I wanted to chime in on the Nick Cordova case. I've spoken to so many victims' families through the years, and they never get closure in any of these cases where a loved one has been lost. But when there is an arrest, a prosecution, and a conviction, what they do get is a sense of justice. They can't close the book, but they can then turn the page. Every victim's family needs to be their own best advocate. You need to continue to make the noise. I've seen cases where things should have been solved a long time ago and they weren't. And I've seen cases where investigators and prosecutors believe they know who's responsible, but they just don't have enough evidence. And they don't go forward because they only get one chance to prosecute. But the bottom line is, if you're a victim, you have rights. If you're a citizen, you have rights. And you need to keep those in charge of the investigation accountable and make sure they understand that you have not forgotten and you will never forget, and you will keep the pressure on. That doesn't mean interfering with the investigation. What it means is reminding them that you have a loss and you do not have justice yet.
It's been 5 years since Nick was killed, and still no arrests. Now, according to Gilbert Police, there's just not enough physical evidence to move the case forward. They've denied any sort of claims of corruption or anything like that, but they do admit that at least for now, there just isn't enough proof. They say that they're working with state and federal agencies, and they are hopeful that somebody will come forward or finally decide to cooperate. But as you can imagine, 5 years later, that is a long time to wait for justice.
Currently, the investigation, it's still active. The Gilbert Police Department say that they have leads and they're relooking into certain things, but as far as any progress that's been made that's any different from year one, there has been nothing. And even since we vocalized that we need more communication with them, the communication is very, very little. I'm still the one having to be like, hey, what can we get updated on this or an update on that? But as far as I know, the investigation is active and they claim that they are still in this with us and they are doing what they need to do on their end. But I just don't believe that because they haven't done anything to prove that they're actually doing their jobs.
Now, the most recent update actually came just a couple of months ago from Alicia herself. She had sent the sergeant a list of questions like she's done for years. But this time, he told her that he would not be sharing any updates moving forward, that she would only be notified if there was an arrest. That was it. And I think the thought process behind that is because Nick's family has not stopped fighting. They've shown up at town halls, they've started social media campaigns, they've built a growing community on TikTok. It's called Noise for Nick. It has tons of followers now. And so when things like that happen, sometimes law enforcement can think you're a thorn in their side. And so they're like, look, I'm not going to even share any information with you until there is an arrest. But they really have been the ones keeping Nick's story alive, online and in their town and anywhere where someone will listen. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about a crime, it's about a family who is left in literal purgatory and 2 kids growing up without their dad and not knowing what happened. I'm sure we all agree here, right? Nick deserves justice, and like we always say, if you know anything at all, please, please, please say something.
If you know anything, come forward. Be a good human. There's not enough of those people in this world anymore. Even if it is your family members, do the right thing. Like, come forward. Imagine, put yourself in our shoes. It's been 5 years. Someone knows something, and we just need answers.
I think the more people that know about justice for Nick Cordova and just the more awareness that we can bring to people remembering Nick and putting pressure on Gilbert PD and getting it solved or getting it into the right hands of actually getting justice for Nick is everyone's main goal.
If there's someone out there that knows anything about this case, whether you're a friend of a friend, you recognize the people, or have heard anything, any little thing can help us. We're just trying to share, any little thing you can think of is more than what we have now.
I just want people to know that his life mattered. Like he wasn't just something, like he was a person, and he was a father and a husband and a son, and he meant so much to so many people. And I just want people to remember him, and I want justice for him, and I want justice for our family. If the public can follow all of our social media pages, we have a TikTok, an Instagram, there's a Facebook. If you can just follow along with Nick's story and try to share his story. The more people that share, everything works better in numbers. And if people are sharing, that's more limelight on his case. And I just think that the more people that know about his case, the better chance it is that we're going to be able to get justice.
So Silent Witness is offering a $20,000 reward for any information that leads to an arrest in Nick's case. And here's what I want to say. If anybody watching this knows anything, even the smallest detail, you can submit a tip anonymously. Your identity will be protected. But it has been several years, and while that may feel like the wind is coming out of your sails and like you're losing hope, I think that there's a lot to be said with that. 5 years, people get sloppy. People start slipping up and saying little things. People may remember now after watching this or hearing this episode something they heard or saw that now in hindsight doesn't quite feel right. So that was the purpose of not only highlighting Nick's story for the entire tour, but also now bringing it to you guys, to the public, because the more eyes we have on this case, the more people that hear about this case, the more likely it will lead to some sort of tip or generate a lead or something. And this family, I know we can all agree, this family deserves justice. Nick was a father, a husband, a friend. He mattered. His story deserves answers. So I just want to encourage all of you, please, please, please interact with this video, like it, comment on it, get it into the algorithm, share the link to this video with your friends on your social media, in your group chat, anything you can do to get Nick's story out there so that we can get answers, his family can get answers and get peace and just understanding of what happened that day on FaceTime. Giving his kids answers, who now his poor daughter who will have that memory for the rest of her life. So thank you so much for tuning in and for hearing Nick's story today. Thank you to everybody who also came on tour and heard his story with me in person, live. A special thank you to Nick's family. And they came to the show in Arizona when we did our show in Phoenix, and it was a very emotional night. But a special thank you to Alicia, Teresa, Wendy, Cherie, your kids, Capri and Cruz, all of you, your friends and family who have been so supportive of us, who have allowed us to share your family story. And we are just all praying for answers and hoping that Nick finally gets the justice that he deserves. So again, thank you for tuning into this episode, everybody. Please share it where you can. And until the next one, be safe. Bye.